connect my Yeti. Speakers are there. There we go. How about now? Can you guys hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, I see it should be on there.
Yeah,
welcome.
I haven't done a Skype call in years, man. I know I'm so used to Hangouts these days, but it's we're going back to the OG.
Well, I like it because it has NDI. So see how quick I was able to pop you into that photo within this overlay? With just a simple straight drop, drag and drop, and you're already in. So welcome. We've just been discussing the whirlwind that has been the last 24 hours and all of the work that we've got accomplished on SPOCRA is what we're calling it.
SPOCRA.
Temporarily.
You got to take me through this acronym.
All right, Kyle, that's all you.
Stake pool operators. Yeah, hold on. Stake pool operators representation. No. What the hell is it? It's late.
It's perfect.
Stake pool operator community representation association.
No. It makes sense. Okay. Stake pool operator collective representation assembly. There
we go. SPOCRA.
SPOCRA.
You got Spock with Ra. You need to get like a Vulcan with the old Egyptian god, right?
Right. Well, like I said, it's all temporary. Everything we're doing is temporary, like placeholders, while we assemble the board of 7. And then once the board of 7 is chosen, they will then pull together a more formal structure, lay it all out, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's pretty cool.
The immediate push. Go ahead, Charles. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to say, the immediate push to kind of have the assembly together is so some of these stake pool operators feel like they have a voice sooner than later, and I think that's really important right now in this time. So that's kind of why we're just pushing to have an initial board assembly that really doesn't necessarily have a charter defined immediately, and then we can take the time to do that right while we're collecting, collective feedback through the communities.
Right. I'm really glad to see trade associations start forming. The reality is that if you want to build a great product, you need a balance in a product, and you need groups of people that worry about different constituencies. And so right now, we at IO Global are super focused on the science and the engineering, and we think a lot about security, correctness, and reliability, and these types of things. But there needs to be commercial representation that says, hang on a second here, these are not just arbitrary tickers, but these are businesses that are behind each and every stake pool, and they have economic realities that have to be weighed alongside security and decentralization and other such things. And if there's no association or associations, because there's usually more than one trade association for anything, it's like standards. We'll solve the problem of having 16 standards by having the 17th standard to rule them all. And then we'll solve the problem of having 17 standards by having the 18th standard. So it's the same deal here. There's always competition here, but the point is to have representation and be able to think about things collectively, and then help guide protocol development and also changes to the parameters of the protocol in a more sensible and balanced way. So when I heard about this today, I saw a tweet about it a little earlier. I said, oh, boy, I got to read the Medium article that you guys wrote. And then I noticed that you guys were doing a live stream. And I said, oh, this is super cool that there's already some momentum. I expected maybe in like a few weeks or a month or two, people would start talking about it. Like literally the day after I made the YouTube video, you guys got together. So this shows how cool the Cardano community is in a nutshell, of how people just like, fuck it, we're just going to do it, right? And we're not going to ask permission. We're just going to go do it.
It's something that's been on my mind for about 5 months now. I've been asking, but everybody was so focused and so busy that their minds were all focused on testnet. They didn't have the space for anything else at that point. And now that the tests that we're out, we're live, people have the bandwidth to start something like this as a community. And it goes beyond just representation with Cardano Foundation and IO Global, but to lobbying, right? Because there's the debate, is staking rewards and pool operator rewards income or dividends, right? Are they taxed at the time we get them, or is it until we sell them? And we need representation in that space as well for the lobbying. We need it for maybe corporations that want to make partnerships with the pools, that kind of thing. We need representation for that way beyond just IO Global and the Cardano Foundation. We need to have stuff in place to be able to have a seat at all of these different types of tables.
Yeah, we do some lobbying with FS Vector, and the foundation does some lobbying as well, specifically about staking. And we're not in this alone. I mean, Tezos is also involved, and other people, because they face the same tax consequences that we face. And at the moment in the United States, it looks like staking revenue is treated as income.
Correct.
At the time you receive it, kind of like barter. Like I give you a truck or something, and then when you sell the truck, you have a tax event as well. So you have basically 2 tax events for everything you receive. And that's not optimal. It really is not. And, we may be able to find a hack in the tax code where you can somehow freeze the staking revenue with the protocol, so you don't receive it until you get a lump or something, and then you can kind of optimize your taxes. But this is an example of where you need a lot of people working together, and we can work cross industry as well, because staking is a business that Ethereum 2 is going to be doing, and a half a dozen other major cryptocurrencies are going to be doing, and they all face the same tax reality as we all face. The other thing is that I mentioned it in my video yesterday. I really want to push this concept of delegation portfolios, because I think one-to-many delegation and delegation portfolios, both of those things will really help small stake pool operators, because they don't have to build a large marketing apparatus, but rather they just join a coalition and they're part of a group, and then people can recommend that, and then certain organizations can actually delegate accordingly. Like, for example, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. Very few people think about it, but they have more money than Saudi Arabia. There's $1.5 trillion in that fund. And that fund is opening up for crypto, and they're actually divesting all of their petrochemicals and carbon fossil fuels. They made all their money from oil, but they're actually going to sell all their oil stuff. So they're rebalancing that portfolio. So let's say they start buying crypto, like a cryptocurrency like Cardano. They actually have very strong national guidelines on what they're allowed to invest in, and very strong national guidelines on how they can make revenue streams. So it may be the case that they're not ROI motivated, but mission oriented or impact oriented with what they want to do. So having delegation portfolios is really important as we start developing an institutional investor class or a mission oriented class, because then you have a menu of options above and beyond just how much money a stake pool operator is going to provide, or returns an operator is going to provide. And then you can also blend a lot of small pools in. Like, for example, if we had portfolios, I would send a formal recommendation to the foundation that they bias their entire delegation strategy, and we would bias our delegation strategy for the things that we delegate to the community, which we're going to do soon, towards smaller operators to facilitate diversity there. And then you mentioned it right before I came on, Kyle, about native assets. And you brought up a very good point, which is even if native assets, you can pay the transaction fee in the native asset, it has to be worth a certain level before you'd consider that. So like if Chainlink, for example, decided to migrate to Cardano, then yeah, everybody would probably be fine with accepting Link as payment because it's so valuable. But if FuCoin was issued tomorrow and there's no market or anything, then why should that pay transaction fees? So the only way you can get around that is by some sort of democratic process where people make decisions of which tokens are allowed to pay fees with ADA versus which tokens are going to pay fees in the native asset. Well, it would be perfect if this was something that stake pool operators and the community as a whole through the Voltaire framework were able to decide of how to whitelist versus generic token or something like that. But then there's a whole process of what is the threshold and how do you get on the list, how do you get off the list. And this is a great example where an industry organization can have a very strong opinion because they can look at it not just from a technological viewpoint, like how we look at it, but they can look at it from an ROI and say, well, does this make sense? We don't want to create unnecessary tax burdens for people, or et cetera, et cetera. So I love the idea that you guys are already starting to talk around this, and I think you can do a lot of good if you have just a little bit of preparation and planning. In particular, I'd highly encourage you to look to the DC fund because it's just getting started. it'll get you some necessary bootstrap capital, so you don't have to strap it yourselves. But more importantly, there's an innovation management platform with that, which does nothing but specialize in upgrading ideas. So that's a perfect environment to kind of talk around how should the governance work, the terms work, what's the mission of the organization, the scope of the organization, which people do we care about, which people are out of scope, these types of things, and help you winnow down to a very specific proposal. And then also there's probably going to be other people thinking about this, and you might be able to merge their efforts with your efforts and combine them together, or create a franchise model where you can have SPOCRA Japan, SPOCRA Korea, SPOCRA Europe, and so forth. So you can kind of have a members organization and then start wiring together these franchises to, represent the interest of the whole. So there's a lot to think about. It's a big endeavor, and I'm glad you guys are starting to do it.
Yeah, we were approaching that. We were talking about diversity, and some of the early proposals were we should have a board seat for every region. We should do this or do that, and we felt, what, we just want the 7 best people who want to put in a lot of work and do this, and then we'll have advisory boards. Right, so you could have an advisory board from the UK, an advisory board from Japan, and that could be like that franchise model that you're speaking of, where they have a seat at the table, they have a voice, or not at the table, can come to the table with their proposals, and they could be their own entity, and all of that. And everything you're saying, we had several discussions even about the ETF. Should we limit pools that are in the thing to one ETF? And we said, no, you can't. We're not here to police. We're not here to tell people or pools what they can and can't do. We're basically here to set guidelines and recommendations and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you
and
guys can also be involved
in.
Go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to say I was pushing back on a lot of the formal structured talk and hey, we're going to do this and do that. But I really appreciate your comments regarding the DC fund. And Marco, I think this is the path. I think we take our initial 7 board and then we engage the DC fund and figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to put this together, with that guidance. I think that's going to be extremely powerful rather than us trying to figure it all out by ourselves and then come there kind of half-cocked.
Right.
And another really important part about the DC fund is that money comes from the community. So the only way you get it is with community approval. So not only is it funding, it's actually a degree of democratic mandate that you get behind the organization, saying the Cardano ecosystem as a whole has decided that there's value in what you're doing and that you are representing a necessary constituency there. So it gives you a bit more clout as you start growing the organization, pushing it. Another thing is that there need to be standards about operation of stake pools, security, these things, because we've seen some operators lose money and some operators not quite get to where they need to go. So you can also think about certification. You can think about credentialing, these types of things as ways that people can get additional badges. If you guys had that, I'd be happy to build something into the Daedalus interface to actually display that on your stake tile.
Speaking of that, we actually did put up a proposal today in the thread just as a side thing to chat about. And it was the idea of a smart contract where it would check off, is this pool part of the association? Check. Is this pool's dues up to date? Check. Is their training, up to date? Check. Is there, all these different things that the smart contract can check. And then once it's validated all those things, then they get a shiny green smiley face badge or something. And we love the idea of all those different criteria being checked and organized through a smart contract.
And that's definitely something that would be a great acid test of the utility of Plutus. In fact, I'm probably sure I can convince some of the Plutus developers to when the time comes to help you guys figure out how to write that contract as a great way of testing the utility of the Plutus ecosystem. And actually, it's a great test for Prism as well, because you can put a lot of metadata about users, and eventually we're going to be building an identity center into Daedalus. So these are examples of where the community can drive innovation. So instead of us sitting down and trying to imagine where the world needs to go, the community can come and show it. The greatest small example I've ever seen of that was years ago, right when smartphones first came out. I saw my first cell phone app for a flashlight. And then Apple saw that and they said, why the hell don't we just build this into the phone? This is brilliant. But no one at Apple or Google, these massive companies, had ever even thought to use the flash on a camera as a flashlight. And then a small community developer did that, and now it's built into every single phone. We all use it as like a flashlight, right? Well, the same thing happens here. Is that bottom-up innovation is always much more powerful, and definitely does help the protocol evolution. The other thing is, remember, we're not going to always be, 50 years from now, completely just ADA based. Our hope is that we can have different decisions, like proof of merit or reputation metrics or things that also can influence your ability to make blocks. The existence of trade organizations like SPOCRA means that there's constituencies that can help in the protocol design so that we can refine the monetary model and the reward model to make it a bit more egalitarian to a meritocratic system. So there's a lot to think about there, but this is the beginning. Now, Kyle, to your point about bureaucracy, I agree with you. It's counterproductive early on to get too bureaucratic, but where I find you can be really powerful is pairings. So if you want 7, pick a few people that are freaks for getting the paperwork done and the due diligence done and so forth. Like Marco really thought about the business side of his pool, while someone else worried a lot about the technical side, because he's saying, hey, this could end up being a multi-million-dollar operation, and it's good that we get this sorted today instead of when it happens, because then everybody's going to not be friends if we don't have that sorted out. Well, similarly, you need to kind of have somebody around who worries about crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and then somebody who really understands people and social dynamics. Basically, where are we going to fight? Where are we going to tend to have disagreement? How do we kind of deal with that disagreement and not become disagreeable in the process? I screwed up a lot in the early days on this. Like our relationship with Michael Parsons, obviously with the Cardano Foundation, was just never good. And the guy went off the rocker. We couldn't do much about it until the Guardians came along. And then that was a great opportunity for us to try to fix things. But there's no reason for a great organization with a great mission to have to wait for an external impulse to fix it. You have to think around what can go wrong and proactively kind of work your way through those scenarios to the point where you feel pretty comfortable about it. And then you have to define success in everything that you do. So, let's say SPOCRA exists a year down the road. What would you like to say that you accomplished in that 1 year period? Did you get 100 members? Did you manage to keep the balance pretty egalitarian, where there's lots of small stake pool operators? Did you make sure that people are making good revenue? It's like whatever you define your success is, and be open about that and say, this is what we believe success looks like. And the whole reason the organization exists is to achieve this success and help us get there. The more upfront you are about it, the more allies you're going to get and along that way. And then it's no longer a disagreement about the mission. It's more about the strategy and tactics. And that's where you can kind of have a lot of opinions float through.
Like a convention in Las Vegas, 2021, for SPOCRA members.
Yeah. Which hotel?
Panels.
What do you like? Which one do you like in Vegas?
I don't know. I was actually thinking about it last night. I would more like one just outside of Vegas, maybe, just outside Vegas. Maybe it's a Red Rock.
Oh, there we go. Well, the manager of the Venetian is actually an ADA fan. I go to Las Vegas every single year for NFR, the big rodeo that they have there. Because I go to a lot of rodeos in Wyoming, Colorado, but NFR is like the Super Bowl of rodeos. And actually, I got a Kevin Costner story I got to tell you too. But first this. So I was checking into the Venetian, and the manager's like, "Are you Charles Hoskinson?" I say, "Hey, how do you know who I am?" And he's like, "I own ADA." Like, what is Shelley? It's like, God damn it! Don't ask me on my vacation went Shelley, man. Don't ask me. And that day, actually, we went to the NFR, and I was in the bathroom at the urinal, and this guy comes up next to me, and he's peeing. I look over, and I'm like, holy shit, that looks a lot like Kevin Costner. That can't be Kevin Costner peeing next to me. So then I go back to my seat in the radio, and they say, like, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest here. Kevin Costner is at the rodeo. I was like, holy shit, I was peeing next to Kevin Costner. This is so cool. Brings a whole new meaning to Waterworld. Well, yeah, see, that's great. You just write those aspirational goals down. Who the hell knows if you'll make them or not? But it costs you the same to dream as it does to dream small. So go dream big, and then see who you can get along with you. And just always understand what the mission is. Why do you exist? Why are you here? You're absolutely right when you say there hasn't been yet enough commercial representation of the business of staking, and accommodations need to be made in the ecosystem for that constituency, or else we'll never achieve true decentralization. So you have to think, well, what does that mean then? And also, is it okay to have a lot of large actors, or is the goal all just small actors? Or, you kind of have to think about those ideals. And the thing is that some people are going to disagree with you. So you might have SPOCRA Classic.
Right.
You might end up having 2 or 3 of these trade organizations, and that's okay. Every industry, if they get sufficiently large, will have multiple organizations. They represent different philosophies, but each of those philosophies blend together over time. And that's how we get to true decentralization. And
Well,
it takes a lot of burdens off the core members.
we had that discussion about charity pools in the thing earlier today as well, and I actually approached this from that point of view. I was wondering about opening up small community centers in towns that really don't have anything but a library. And I thought, and I was trying to find ways of funding it. And I actually tweeted out a few times in February if running a stake pool would be a way of funding a community center off of the rewards. And the more and more I looked into it, I was like, wow, this actually is a pretty good business model, business idea. And then I remembered that whole airplane thing, before you can help others, put your mask on. And then when we were talking about those who want to create charity pools, first start your pool, get it going. Once you've started and you know the system, then approach a charity that you want to work with, right? Talk them, sell them, bring them into the ecosystem, right? Don't rely on, people who are already in the system. Go out and get them. Bring in a charity and their mailing list and say, hey, look, this is what I can do for you, that kind of stuff. And, these are the kind of conversations that a group like this can just have in the first day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just hanging out, that's the kind of things that's amazing about this, I feel like.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, the sky is the limit. It's amazing how fast these things can grow. And when it's real and genuine, it grows really quickly. When it's forced on the community, it always fails. There's no greater example of cryptocurrency than the Bitcoin Foundation. I remember when that first came out, you had these guys like, oh, yeah, Satoshi's an honorary member, and we're just going to decide, how Bitcoin is going to be regulated and where we're going to go. And I was the founding chairman of the education committee. And I was only there for a brief few months. And the entire time I was there, I was like, guys, this just feels like you're trying a hostile takeover of Bitcoin. This doesn't feel right. And sure enough, it lost legitimacy so quickly. And everybody kind of turned on it. Because at the end of the day, you had these unelected people just showing up and saying, hey, we're just going to make decisions now. And that's never how it works in the decentralized system. Instead, you need to just say, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Instead, I'm going to tell you what I'd like to accomplish and who wants to go do that with me. Like a totally different low barrier approach. And then suddenly people just start showing up and saying, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do this together. And you wake up, you got a movement. You got 50 people, you got 100 people, 200 people. And all these really cool ideas start flowing through. There's a lot of cool models you can look at. Holacracies are one. They're meant for horizontally integrated organizations that are meritocratic. And we're actually thinking a lot about DAO theory at IO Global. It's one of our keen interests, and we're going to do a heck of a lot of research and build reference systems for it in 2021. My personal goal is for the foundation in some reasonable period of time, like 3 to 5 years, to no longer be a physical organization, but rather be a decentralized organization that lives on the Cardano blockchain. And actually, what we're going to do on our side is push for legal rights behind decentralized organizations as if they are real-life corporations. And I think we have a real good chance of accomplishing that in either the jurisdiction of Malta or in the state of Wyoming. In fact, we've talked to a couple of the Wyoming legislators specifically about this, like how do we give legal rights to smart contracts and digital signatures? And then by extension, how do we create a decentralized organization that has legal rights? Because that means the DAO can actually own intellectual property, it can hold money, it can enter into contracts, even though it's not a registered business and it has no owner or anything like that. It kind of just lives in the cloud. So we're going to push a lot of work to build templates and try to get the legal infrastructure for people to do that. And then anybody in community can take those templates and then apply them towards their business and then use smart contracts and a blockchain to actually manage the treasury, pay dues, handle who's a member, who's not a member. And then we can build all kinds of things into the protocol for these things if they become popular enough.
Yeah, that's actually a lot of the stuff we talked about about lawyers and CEOs and setting up, the foundation to make it, solid. And then the problems you run into, well, is it set up in the U.S.? Is it set up here? We have people all over the world, and then we had, again, that's why we like the idea of the smart contracts for the funds, but again, and all of that kind of stuff. And all those questions were raised last night, and we talked about it. We're like, but let's hold off until we have our board, and then we can start research groups. We can have advisory boards, all of that. And we like that structure, in that going forward, and all those things. It sounds perfect for exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, because my goal is just to create the tools for people to use. I'm not going to tell them how to use it and what they should do with it. Rather, I should say I'm going to build the infrastructure, the nuts and bolts, and if I've done my job right, it should be pretty turnkey for you guys, and life should be pretty easy. And you'll tell me where I got it wrong, and then I can go back to the drawing board and kind of figure out how to fix it, improve it. But this is the only way we're ever going to get to a decentralized society. This whole top-down approach and CEOs and this thing, it just doesn't work anymore. We live in a distributed world. I mean, my own company, we only have 250 people, but we're in 40 countries. We're as decentralized as Microsoft with 250 people. It's pretty crazy when you think about that. And yet we find a way to work. When COVID hit, it had no impact on us at all because we already all work from home, right? And this is the economy that we're going into. But all the legal structures, the government structures, the business structures, they're designed for people that pack their lunch pail and go to work 9 to 5 every day at an office. So we need to update that. And I think this is a great place where we can innovate.
Well, speaking of leadership, for example, when we were on the Cardano effect yesterday, and we were talking, and you were talking about, you have to make decisions, and they're going to be popular and unpopular. You're never going to make everybody happy, and that was one of the first big lessons I learned in life. I was running a guild of about 100 people in EverQuest, and as the guild leader, you set up these raids. You have to choose who gets what loot. You have to, who's going to go on the raid, who's going to take point, what's the game plan. And every week I would spend 5 to 20 hours trying to make everybody happy. And no matter what I did, somebody was like, well, I should have got the red stick. I should have got this. I should have got that. Why did they get it and not me? And then I realized, wait, I'm just going to make nobody happy, and I'm going to make nobody unhappy. I'm just going to do what I feel is best as leader. You guys put me in charge to make these decisions. So if I make the decision pure of heart, in my mind, the best decision I thought at the time with the knowledge I had, I can sleep at night. Right.
I used to play EverQuest. I had a high elf enchanter, and I also had a human wizard. Remember the Planes of Power expansion pack where you could finally start teleporting around?
Yeah.
Before that, yeah.
And I had a level 50 monk.
Can I buy crack? Can I get some crack? The mana buff enhancement that enchanters do.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a level 50 monk and the Planes of Fear and all that kind of stuff. Those things took a lot of planning to because if you die, it was 3 or 4 hours getting everybody back out and rezzed and set up, and so you're dealing with people's time in life. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of pressure.
Right. And I think the greatest example of where that can go wrong was remember World of Warcraft, Leroy Jenkins.
Yep.
Yeah. Leroy
Jenkins. I'm leading a D&D campaign for a bunch of 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds.
Leroy just ran in.
And my nephew, he's the Leroy Jenkins of the group. The rogue's all, let's be quiet and snipe down the hall. And he's like, donuts! Because he's 9. And he's throwing burritos at everybody. I mean, you gotta love kids' imaginations.
A lot of people scoff at that, but you're 100% right. It doesn't matter where you accrue the leadership skills. You're thinking, I have a group of people that are investing non-trivial time, effort, and let's be frank, money. I mean, time is money. There's huge opportunity cost for these things. And if we don't work together, we can't achieve a common goal. And, in some cases, in a highly competitive environment. League of Legends is another example of that. You have a team of 5v5 or 3v3. You have to work together. If you don't work together, you can't win the game. So there's a lot of great lessons to learn there. And this is no different in that respect. There are rules of the game. And first we ask, are the rules fair? and where are the rules going to go, and can we win? Can we actually achieve our goals with those rules? And then if we can't, well, we need to change the game. If we can, well, then we need to know how to play the game well. And yeah, there's going to be some winners and some losers, and there's going to be some changes here and there. And I was really upset when they nerfed Xerath and League of Legends. It really pissed me off. I always mitted with him. And I was like, okay, that's just, I guess I'll cast it in or some shit. But you just deal with it and you move on, right? As long as it's still a playable game. And similarly, as long as stake pools are still a reasonable business model, and we failed if they're not. The other thing is, like, you have to think about where it's going. So what is the reality at $1 ADA? What is reality at $5 ADA? Is there ever going to be a case where K is 5,000? Is there ever going to be a case where K is 10,000? I mean, what does that mean? What does the network look like under a system like that? And then kind of imagine where those revenue streams are going to go. So if we do have oracles and Hydra channels and native assets and other value-added services that are provided, decentralized infrastructure, like the storage as a service, for example, if we pull IPFS into the system, what does that revenue model now look like? And how can SPOCRA kind of prep for that and make sure that we can optimize in such a way? So these are some things that you guys need to talk around, and they're fun.
And it has been.
Then you can, yeah, go ahead.
I have been, as I told Adam, part of my thing is to see what the next thing is. While he was working on testing the servers, I've been researching Oracle pools. And I love the idea of Oracle pools, as much as I can understand it from a non-coder perspective. But I think those are going to be huge, just because, like you said, from what I gather on my take on Oracle pools, it's you pay the one-time fee to code the block with the factual information that's been curated by all of these people, right? And then it's free to access other than the transaction fee from then on. So somebody in Africa Village can afford to access that information, can run a smart contract off that information, and not be charged like a $4 US fee, and which would be a week's worth of work or something in that country.
Right. Or on the other side, they can actually make money by being a data provider, because in many cases you actually need to get data in certain hard-to-find places, because maybe you're an oil trader and you need to know certain things about the weather and where. Actually, oil hedge funds do this all the time. They'll pay people to follow oil tankers and take pictures of them, and they use sophisticated computer models to see how low they set on the water, and then they can extrapolate how full the tanker is. So they can predict what inventories are going to be a few days ahead of time, and then they can extrapolate with their models what the value of oil is going to be relative to supply and demand. I mean, this is how sophisticated people get. They also use satellite pictures and so forth. So data is king in this economy, and what you're doing is liberating it, by having Oracle pools, and you're providing many different people. This is how Bloomberg got so rich. Michael Bloomberg, he created kind of a monopoly over financial data. They had the Bloomberg terminal, and now he's worth like $60 billion. And Bloomberg is one of the most valuable companies in the world, and everybody uses Bloomberg terminals or Thomson Reuters service. Well, oracles are democratizing all of that, and they're liberating the world's data and providing many different ways to show it. And also, you're creating a marketplace for data. So it works in both directions. Instead of having to predict what people want to know, people can put bounties on things they want to know, and then Oracle pools can kind of figure out how do we get access to that, and then the free market will kind of build those economies and so forth. So it's a really exciting world to live in, where we can go and kind of Uber this thing up.
Yeah, I have a friend who's in advertising.
Yeah, I mean, that blows my mind.
Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
I mean, let me talk, Marco. Sorry. This is kind of my bread and butter in a way. My core business, I pivoted out of ad tech, and my business is a GUI-based IoT, Wi-Fi control systems, which can be set up, very quickly and very easily. And I have customers, growing plant cultivation systems and things like that. But I've been, ever since I saw your whiteboard, I started building. That's what I started doing. Your whiteboard a couple of years ago just got me on fire. And so, I had no problem with wind shelling because I'm still building, right? And what I'm looking at is incentivizing models. And I learned a lot from running a stake pool about how to do that appropriately. And, okay, yeah, you can meter an IoT device on the data side, but then I'm looking at, okay, how can I incentivize these guys with data? And from a high level, I'm looking at, DMPs and things like that, so I can actually pay them in tokens for that data and then try and market that on the back end. And so I'm kind of looking how I can tie all this together, but I've got a lot of content coming out with, new products and whatnot lately, but, I'm gung for with Gogan and what that's going to enable. From a high level, I want to kind of do what Amazon did and enable peer-to-peer marketplaces for how devices operate. So everything we do is open hardware. You can, go to Git, splash the code, and be up and running. All the I/O boards that we have are all open source or open hardware designs and whatnot. I still got to bridge a couple gaps with how to tie that in with oracles and whatnot. But that's kind of where I want to take it. I think that's an awesome model for people to, in third world countries, and a lot of this is, right now my customers are hobbyists and privileged guys, and I'll be honest about that. But, I'm looking at, okay, at what point is Wi-Fi going to be more of a human right? And once that happens, I can open up to where, you can create business opportunities for people in very, very low, needy economies or underprivileged economies for them to create something where other users around the world can adopt that and use that. And so that's kind of, a little bit out there or whatnot, but I don't think it's too far. So that's kind of my vision. I'm an entrepreneur. I have been for a while, but I've just always, my problem is, I'm more of I'm a kind of do-it-all guy. I market, I sold for Intel for a while, so I've got that whole back end, but, everything I do, I build myself, and, I could benefit from, expanding into a larger team.
Right. And, actually, we're working with a firm, a telco firm in Tanzania, where they're actually trying to build an ISP through mesh nets for cell phones. And this is a great example of the use of this technology, where you say it's just simply too expensive to build traditional 4G infrastructure, but then you could build these super low-cost open hardware devices, create mesh nets, and then suddenly you can wire it into like one backbone, and then the whole village or the whole small city now has internet connectivity and the telecommunications infrastructure. And it's just amazing what you can do as open hardware today. I mean, it was fantasy 10 years ago that we'd have these capabilities. And the problem, and I'd highly encourage you to read a white paper. It came out of IBM research. If you Google IBM Adept, IBM and Samsung got together and they started exploring how do we merge IoT and blockchain together. And they used BitTorrent, Telehash, and Ethereum as the pilot back in 2015, but it didn't have the mojo that it really needed to get off the ground. But they came up with a lot of really good ideas about how to incentivize things and so forth. And I guarantee if you email some of the people who worked on that team, they were probably really frustrated that it got canceled because they were super passionate about it. And they outlined a lot of problems where IoT doesn't have a right incentives layer. There's all this infrastructure that's going to last a long time, but there's no money to maintain it. And it's not an economic citizen. It doesn't actually generate revenue. So it's going to be abandoned. And it's like this IoT abandonware, basically. So it's going to become a big problem. And they were trying to resolve that with the Adept project.
Well, and that goes back to the point of the whole treasury
I'll
concept.
take a look at that. Thank you.
And we talked about how the treasury lives in the protocol. You know what I mean? And so if you can set up a way of, funds are just automatically added to it from somewhere, and it just builds and builds and can be used, automatically without, a whole crew, a team, it helps limit infrastructure and costs,
Yeah, and that's the cool part about Voltaire is that the money is guaranteed, but the community ultimately is going to decide how to deploy that. And you kind of have to learn how you crawl before you can walk, before you can run. So right now we're in the crawling stage with the early days, and it's all about participation and voting experience, and are we properly using innovation management? We actually partnered, I don't know if this is official or not, but I'll break the news on your guys' show. We partnered with IdeaScale. We're just working out the logistics there of that relationship, but they're a major IM company, and they're going to work really closely with us to try to make sure that we have the right environment because it's not good enough just to take ballots. We want them to be successful. We want them to be actionable. We want likewise efforts to merge together and for people to meet each other. This is as much a social platform as it is a platform for innovation. And the point here is that, a lot of you stake pool operators before we started the ITN didn't know each other. And then the ITN came out, you met each other. Well, similarly, if you're in the business of innovation, you should be able to use this platform to find people who also want to do the same kinds of things you want to do. And then you can learn from each other and work together and build together and so forth. So you have to have good partners there to kind of stake that around. And that's the crawling stage. And then the walking stage is to see it all come together in production and put millions and millions of dollars every month on the table. And then the running stage is for that thing to completely decentralize end to end. So all the centralized or federated infrastructure to host up that innovation management and ballot submission gets pulled into the Cardano protocol directly, and it's completely managed by Cardano itself. It takes a little bit of time to do that, and then you have to think carefully about the security model and make it DDoS resistant and all this stuff. There's a lot of traditional InfoSec work that has to be done, and the incentives have to be built correctly. But if the community's aligned to get there, it's inevitable. Right. And it might take 6 months or a year, but it will happen. And then once it's there, you have one of the world's largest VCs replenishing itself every year that is doing nothing but spending its money on making the ecosystem better. And at each dimension, making it more fair, making it faster, making it more performant, making it more resistant to attacks, building new business models, et cetera, et cetera. The sky is the limit, and it's only limited by our capacity to work together.
And that's what amazed me so much, how there wasn't already an operator trade guild or whatever, because once this thing gets fully decentralized, right, pool operators are the backbone of the system.
Yeah.
Right. We're the ones that have to implement any kind of changes. We're the ones that make sure that the security is maintained. That we're the ones that are on the ground running. Because once things leave testing, once they leave the stuff, it comes to us, and we have to maintain that. We have to build that. We have to, keep it going. And
right.
And for this to be $1 trillion network or system, we have to have some kind of organization to make sure that it still is operating at 100% all the time.
Right. Yes. And I'm not sure that I was. Sorry, Charles. I'm not sure that I was surprised that it took so long. During ITN is kind of when operators got their foot wet, and operators became OGs, and now we're at a point where we can recognize how changes affect the ecosystem because we lived through it. And so I think the timing is actually neither premature nor late. I think it's perfect timing.
Yeah, and you're going to be surprised how much competition you get and how much diversity you guys get. And you're not real until you've had your first scandal or fight. A lot of people came on board Cardano after the Cardano Foundation incident, and they always said the same thing. It's like, we were really impressed on how you guys handled that, as opposed to what happened with Tezos or these other things where it just kind of blew up. Here, we just said, let's just go deal with it and figure it out. It was very painful and stressful at the time, but it was an anti-scandal. It's like it fizzled out. All these people were waiting with popcorn for the fireworks, and the fireworks never came. We just kind of moved on. So that's a testimony to the fact that people really wanted to work together and just get it done and fix it. And similarly, great organizations are capable of surviving strife and conflict and disagreement. And we've certainly had our fair share, and you guys are going to have the exact same situation at some point in your history. And that's a good thing. It makes you stronger, it makes you smarter. And it's the same situation here. You thought about SPOCRA after some things didn't quite go your way. And that's a natural response. And instead of just going to Reddit or Telegram or Twitter and just bitching about it, he said, well, fuck it. Let's solve the problem in a more general way and make it better for everybody and make the protocol better for everybody. That's the difference between our community and other communities in the ecosystem. Our people solve real problems. Our people are capable of working together, and they don't need permission. They don't need a committee. They just pick up the fucking phone and they say, hey, Marco, we got this problem. What are we going to do about it? And then a day later, I'm on the live stream with you. We're talking about it. And 2 weeks from now, it'll be more, and 3 weeks, it'll be more, and it'll just keep going and going. And bound to have something screw up, and then you'll fix that, right? And that's what gives me hope. It means that I don't need to be around here. I can be a spectator as much as I am a leader. And I know for a fact that this is going to get done. Cardano is going to grow to, an ecosystem with millions of people, billions of people, and it's going to be just fine. It doesn't need a custodian. It doesn't need a leader. It doesn't need somebody to sit around and make hard decisions. I'll have confidence that the system as a whole is going to make better decisions than I could ever make, and that the system as a whole is going to be able to survive any hit that comes. Because we all like to believe we're big, but let's be honest here. Look at Libra when they actually tried to rock the boat. Look how hard the U.S. government hit Mark Zuckerberg and his guys, and how they had to cave a little bit. The real fight's going to come when Cardano has 1 billion people on it, and it is running economies in Africa and other places. And then suddenly U.S. government or China or somebody's going to wake up and say, well, no, we don't like this. We don't feel so comfortable here. The ecosystem has to have the ability to withstand that hit. And it's only going to get there if it's truly decentralized.
Yeah. I always said Libra was the greatest distraction.
But at the same time, too, you also want some kind of leadership, like maybe it's the Cardano Foundation that is helping orchestrate and making sure that the pieces are all moving together in the same direction, and one's not taking this freeway that way or that freeway that way. You kind of want to have some kind of, orchestrator or conductor.
It's meritocratic, right? The leaders aren't self-appointed or they just rule by fiat, but rather they did stuff and people know who they are. And they say, well, the reason why this person's running this thing is because we feel they're the most competent to do that. And they proved it with their track record. And there's checks and balances in place that if they get too big of an ego, they kind of get filtered out, And leaders are also scoped to their time. A great example would be Winston Churchill. So the Brits kept him around during World War II, and he was the great leader. And then after World War II, they said, we don't need a guy like Churchill anymore. We're going to go, bring somebody else in. So you can be a wonderful leader for an event or for a period of history or for a particular culture, but the organization can actually outgrow you, or the organization's needs can change, and you need a different type of leadership. Another great example would be Microsoft with Bill Gates. At one time, he was the greatest living entrepreneur. Microsoft was worth $600 billion. But then he got distracted. He started doing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then he was kind of in Microsoft, kind of not in Microsoft. He'd be like, I'm doing AIDS in Africa, but I go buy Skype and go buy Nokia and this stuff. And eventually the Microsoft board said, we need to move on. So they got rid of Gates. And they brought in Satya Nadella. And he came in, he did the HoloLens, the Microsoft Surface, Windows 10, and really changed that company and modernized it and made it friendly for open source software and so forth. And, Microsoft has tripled in value since Satya Nadella came on board, and it's restored itself. So Bill Gates was probably the greatest living CEO in the 1990s in terms of his capability to execute and build wealth and dominate the market. I mean, look what he did to Netscape. But in 2010, he was useless. He missed the iPhone, he missed Google, he missed Facebook, he missed all these things. Same person, two different events. So that's the other thing about leadership is there's an ephemeral nature to it. I had to learn that because of Ethereum. I was a big guy there for a little while, and then suddenly I wasn't anymore. And, the people didn't like me as much anymore. And so I kind of had to think, God, all right, I guess nothing is permanent. And so, I came by with Cardano and I said, well, I'm going to be here and try to do as much good as I can as long as I'm useful and as long as people tolerate me. But I'm kind of an asshole. So at some point they won't anymore. And I'll hear the exit music and I'll know to go back onto my farm and just start riding horses again or something like that. And that's okay, because if I did it right, then they won't need me anyway. It'll be much better without me.
Yeah, sometimes it's, you have to get to the point where you have to check your ego at the door when you're in these type of positions. You can't let things hit you personally, and be able to communicate with people without, coming off like, I know this because I am in charge. Just do it.
Yeah, it's
easy. Yeah, but you can't take shit either.
Right.
Yeah, and people let you do that too. That's the problem, is that when you're the big guy, a lot of the times they'll let you get away with treating people like crap for a while, but eventually you just hollow everybody out and you get high turnover and so forth. A lot of investors, when they want to assess the fundamental health of a company and the quality of their chief executive and where the company's at, they look at turnover of female engineers because they actually tend to be the most sensitive employees. And I know an investor where He's made 11 bets based on this, and 11 out of 11 times he's been right about a scandal, just based on the percentage of female engineers and if it went up or down. If it went down a substantial amount in a 24, 36-month period, there was a scandal in the organization, and leadership had to change. Uber, all these companies, he just got it right over and over again, and he made a fortune trading stocks this way. Because you always ask for canaries in the coal mine. There's always sentinels that let you know when a culture is toxic or an organization is not working so well. So that's another thing you guys got to think around. It's like, not only define what is the definition of success for SPOCRA, but also what type of culture do you want to have with SPOCRA? Like, when you talk to your colleagues there and you go to work every day, you're actually making decisions. What type of work environment do you want? Do you want to just have something super chill where you call each other and just kind of hang out and discuss it over a beer? Do you want some degree of formality? And then you kind of ask yourself, like, how do we avoid the collecting assholes, and what do we do about them? There was a certain stake pool operator and member of the Cardano community who's very smart, very capable. I won't mention his name because he'll just yell at me again and do all this stuff, but I think people can infer. And we kind of got some tussle over Twitter. I can't even remember what it is. And then there was a threat of a lawsuit and all this other stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, why do we want this working relationship? Why are you even here if this is how you work with people and you interact with people? I'm like, well, I don't have to be here. You don't have to be here. We should get along. Let's figure it out. Let's talk about it. The same issue with that Nostradamus guy. I actually did meet him in Hong Kong, and I did an interview with him, and we had an interesting rapport. And I actually have nothing against him as a human being or as a guy. I just think that there are some issues there, and those issues make it really difficult for him to have good relationships with most people, or at least with us. His demons kind of get at him. So you're going to run into the exact same situation. There's always that one person or group of people, no matter what community you have, where you're at, that just go crazy, or they're crazy for you. They go at you.
I call it the 10% asshole rule. Basically, right. You can take any group of people, 100 people off the street, right? All races, all men, women, children, and you take all 100 of them, 10% of them are going to be assholes, right? And so no matter what group you put together, no matter what you do, you're always going to deal with it no matter what. I think we've been doing a really good job with the Discord the last couple of days of keeping people on topic. Anytime people start the idea of we're going to be the pool operator police, we stop it right there. Right, we're not here to police the pool operators. We're not here to set, that type of stuff. We're here to put together something that's advisory. So any kind of talk of policing, well, we should have pools limited to this, or they should be, limited to that, or they should have to. No. We're here to set guidelines. Because again, if we only get 50% or 50 pools, then how strong is our group really? You know what I mean?
Right.
So we want to make sure that people don't start down those rabbit holes, and we've been doing.
Yeah, no, I hear that, Mark. I think what the takeaway is we need to figure out how to handle adversarial people or people who are toxic to the culture, right? My first employee tried to sue me, and once I got wind of that, game changes completely. I understand your perspective there, Charles. I was a small business at the time, and I scrapped for, I got kids, I got family, and so, everything changes when that adversarial stance takes, and we have to protect that and protect the culture. I think that's the biggest thing, because we will have bad apples, and so we need to think about that now, early.
Right. And that's why I say proactively just kind of like try to set that culture, and then try to be diligent about enforcing that culture and having a time. We have our own culture officer at IO Global. Originally, it was actually Tamara Hassan. That's where she got hired. And then she went to HR, and now she's chief of staff. And now it's Tom Flynn.
Okay.
And Tom also works on our PSG side. Tom's great, and Tam was great in that role. But we recognized early on culture is super important, because if you don't have your culture right, no one wants to work for you. And my problem is I hire the brightest people in the world, and they can go work for anybody. They can go work for Microsoft and Google and Facebook, and all the time those guys are trying to poach my people. Sometimes they offer them twice as much money. The only reason they stay is they like their coworkers, they like the culture, and they like the problems that they're working on. And there's plenty of ways to make money in life. You don't have to be a stake pool operator. You can certainly go and do something else. Be an eBay power seller. You can be an Uber driver, right? So why does a person choose to be part of this type of organization and work on the Cardano protocol and make some money there? It's because they enjoy the job. They want to do the job. This is something they really believe in. They believe in the mission and the environment and so forth. And great elite organizations are always capable of promoting elite cultures that people just really enjoy being part of, and they like the workflow and so forth. And this is why you have diversity in these organizations, because cultures are different. So if you've done your job right, SPOCRA will have a very clear identity, but there's going to be some people who disagree with that identity, and they don't like that culture. Maybe it's too laid back, maybe it's too strict, whatever, and they go and build a competing body, and that's okay. Because ultimately they get what they want, and they're happy with that structure, right?
One of the first things we talked about when we were doing this is every pool operator's in this for a different reason, right? And we are here again not to police them, but to offer a place. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to offer is education. Education on being a pool operator, education for delegating, just making sure that everybody is informed as much as possible and helping set that up. And I think that will help with the culture and help with all of that.
Yeah. And we have resources available. There's Lars Brunius, my director of education. If you guys ever want to talk to him, might be able to create a Udemy course or something like that. It'd be super cool to do that. And then the foundation is also starting an education program. There's absolutely no reason for that to be a unilateral effort. It'd be super cool to see real life stake pool operators be heavily involved in that. One of my most joyous moments was University of Wyoming at the hackathon last year that Kraken and Caitlin and the rest of the gang put on. And we had these high school students, and they were real young, and they came by, and they were trying to set up a stake pool. On the testnet code that we had, and they were just trying to explore how these things were working. I was like, wow, this is so cool to see these young kids actually learning how Cardano works. And then I gave a lecture to a junior high class on Ouroboros. I think they were like 12 or something like that. And I said, okay, how do I explain this to a 12-year-old? This is a really unique challenge. I kind of have one level, and I kind of have to figure out how to kind of lower it just a little bit to get through and make it relatable. But education really is just it's the pinnacle of expertise, and it's the pinnacle of all things. My dad's a doctor, and the highlight of his career as a physician was when he started teaching at a medical school. He was a clinical professor at Rocky Vista School of Medicine, and he had all these young medical students, and he remembered himself 30 years ago, when he was a precocious young medical student. And now he's basically seeing like a younger version of himself come through the door and know just as little as he knew 30 years ago. And being able to mentor them and guide them and sculpt them, it's one of the most rewarding parts of any person's career. And it's just so much fun to do that. I miss it. I love teaching. Jesse
Smith is actually in the comments saying that those were his students.
Oh, Jesse, that's so cool. Yeah. And that was at, what high school are you with in Wyoming? I keep forgetting what's the name of it? You still with us, Jesse?
It's just a bit of a delay.
Okay.
But for example, I know you guys are doing something in Wyoming next month with the University of Wyoming. The CPA I use, he's going to be teaching some crypto CPA classes at the event.
Okay.
David Pope, I don't know, he's on the blockchain community in Wyoming and stuff like that. But he's going to be teaching some classes.
Shoshone. Yeah, it's a very small town in Wyoming. Most towns in Wyoming are pretty small. The capital's like 50,000 people, And some of those towns get pretty small, where the guy who owns the bar is the mayor and the sheriff. But I love Wyoming. It's a great place, and it's one of the last frontiers around. My parents now live up in Gillette.
If it wasn't for that weather, I'd be up there in a heartbeat. I live in Northwest Arizona, and it's kind of in a weather sweet spot. So we're about 20 degrees cooler than Vegas and 20 degrees cooler than Phoenix. And so it's pretty nice all year round up here. So I looked at Wyoming, and then I saw the chart 7 months of the year. Oh.
Well, just to bridge the gap, Charles, Jesse is the individual who won the ITN. He is the pool operator who earned the most rewards with a 10% pool, single pool. So he beat out everybody.
That was Bounty, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, Bounty won.
By the way, we have another bounty. Who do you guys think is going to get the first block for the Epic?
You. Kind of set yourself up for that one.
Well, there's a non-zero possibility. I won't count it if we make it. It has to be a official block not made by Input Output Global. So I'm really, because we run the BFT nodes, so that doesn't count. So there's got to be a pool that's not Emergo, IOHK, or CF.
The ZZ guys out of Japan,
man.
Right? They're out of Japan or something. Maybe.
I think 1% might get it. Just speaking percentage-wise, possibly ZZZ, possibly IOG.
Right. Well, whoever gets it, we'll give them a T-shirt and certainly a goodie package, and we'll make sure to make a big deal about it. But actually, I think every stake pool that participates in that first Epic should get something, because it's the first Epic Club. That's like an OG badge of honor, man. That's like being a Bitcoin miner in January of 2009, if you think about it.
I own an autographing company, so I'm willing to sit down and work with you and to be able to send out an autograph to each of the pool operators.
Well, that'd be so cool. That'll be so cool. I gave you my email in the thing, but just send me an email and I'll synchronize with my EA. His name's Michael Lagudia. We can get that all set up. But I'd be more than happy to do something special, because it'd be cool to send something actually to every stake pool that actually makes a block in that first Epic, because that's part of history for our protocol, and it's so exciting to actually see that happen. Our chief scientist is damn near in tears about it. Because remember, Agalos has been working on this since 2014. Even before he joined IO Global, he was working independently at University of Edinburgh, formalizing Bitcoin to pursue a proof of stake research agenda. And he had been thinking about proof of stake since NXT in 2013. So, to actually go from thinking about it to a $4 billion production system with people all around the world running it is just such a humbling experience, because he had to design everything and think about everything and put all these pieces together. And it's just a really magical thing for him.
I feel like this should be like a live stream, watching the clock count as the epoch turns over, kind of like a New Year's type of thing.
Blow up my Twitter, for whoever made the first block. I'd love to see that. And then everybody who did something in the Epic, will do something special for you guys. Well, anyway, it's 10:35 at night here, and I got a really early morning, and I've been up crazy fucking long.
Well,
I got to get some.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do have one small question that will take one word answer. Sure. Epoch or Epic?
I never pronounce that right. There's Epoch, Epic. There's like 4 different ways of pronouncing that damn word. I guess it depends on your nationality and how French you are.
Potato type of thing. But
Epic is probably the canonical, but Epoch is another. But I think Epic is more proper. But then the problem is you conflate it with Epic EPIC, right? Like Epic Games or these things. So it's like you just can't win with that. I would have never named it Epoch.
Yeah, Epoch is what I always thought it was.
It's probably Epoch. Who the hell knows? When I was first talking about it, I said, well, why do we need these epics? Why can't we just do it on a block by block basis like other proof of stake protocols? And at the time, we're like, oh, there's all these deep theoretical reasons why that doesn't make sense. But then there's a professor at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign named Pramod Viswani, and he actually figured out a way to do it without the epics. It's called Nakamoto proof of stake. And I'm like, damn it, we could have got rid of all the epics altogether and just done it on a block by block basis. But there's some trade-offs in that protocol and so forth, and there's more research required. But this is the beautiful part about the system, is that he didn't just write that paper. He actually read all of our papers, and we had long conversations with him and so forth. And then he put this all-star team of professors together and just kind of spit that out over a few months. And we read the paper, and we were like, man, I wish we would have written that paper. That would have been a lot of fun.
Well, thanks again for joining us on our quest to 50. And this is memorable. And again, thank you. And I'll look forward to that email.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll talk to you soon, Marco. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay. Good night, Charles.